Today we're going to talk about courage. We're going to be with courage. And what is this thing called courage? I'm sure you've heard a few things before. Maybe I'll say something you've heard before, but not like the way I'm going to say it today. I trust. Courage. We have to have the courage to win. And it's the power within that gets us there. That takes us all the way through from the first breath to the last breath. Doesn't even mean it's our last breath. But that's a whole nother talk. And so I want to start with where does courage come from? It actually comes from the word cur. It's Latin. And that literally means heart. Now, I'm not talking about the human heart. I'm not talking about the heart. That's the organ within our body. I'm talking about the heart. So I just think of whatever it is that the human mind and all of us that we are can bring into ourselves this indescribable love. It's the heart of all that is. It's beyond this world. It's beyond our galaxy. It's beyond the cosmos. This is heart. Just feel that in your body as the heart. The heart. Right? That's cur. And then the original use of the word courage, it means to stand by one's core. So stand by. So let's see. Unfortunately, the inside of me cannot stand right here. But that's, it's not me and then something else here. It's actually to stand by within is the core. So just like heart, we're talking about core. God, spirit, presence. So to stand by one's core. And this is, I was thinking about this, and this is a striking concept that reinforces the belief found in absolutely almost all traditions, all ancient wisdoms. I'm deliberately not using the word faith today as it relates to sometimes how we use that word. So all traditions and ancient wisdoms, living from the center of life, living from the core of life, is what they urge us and beseech us and pull us to be, right? And when we allow ourselves to live from that core, this power, this presence. I call it God, and you choose to call it whatever you want. This core. It's the source that enables us to say yes to life. This is the source that enables us to say yes to life and to move in the direction, no matter what is going on, no matter what happens outside of us. Regardless of any circumstance, situation, or condition, it moves us in the direction of that yes, that sacred yes. And we cannot be moved or waved. And that's what it means, I think. I'm still pondering, but I think that's what it means to me to have unwavering faith. Unwavering faith. So, with unwavering faith, I go beyond facing life. Life comes, doesn't it? It comes, and I have to face it. And then it comes again, and I have to face it. And it comes, and it comes, and it comes, and I'm waiting sometimes. Well, come on, life, I know you're going to hit me. I know the other shoe's going to drop, whatever. I'm sort of standing around, and it's going to keep coming, and I have to face it. And in facing life, whatever it has to offer time after time, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes when it comes and I have to face it, I shrink. Sometimes when I face it, I hide. Sometimes I run like you know what. I run as if the building's on fire and my hair's on fire. I run. Sometimes when I'm facing it, I deny it in that it's actually not there. It's just not there. I'm not going to face it. Nope, not going to face it. It's just not there. That's called a spiritual bypass, by the way. Sometimes I plead with it. Please don't come up right now. I don't want you to come. You know, everything was just so good. And you, life, decided to show your face. And I don't want it to come up, so I plead with it not to. So one of beautiful poet and author that I'm a huge fan of, along with a lot of other people, is Mark Nepo. If you haven't read him, get Mark Nepo's stuff. And he has this book about courage. The whole book is about courage. And he talks about that this kind of facing life as it comes at us is finding our way to our core. We're finding our way to our core. And yet, when finding our way to the core this way, I liken it to like it's at arm's length. It's outside of me. I'm not that close to it. It's not inside of me. It's like I keep it sort of here. And that's finding our way to the core. And maybe sometimes this will seem familiar. I can tend to be reactionary. So, I was born in August. I'm a Leo. And this is called, so I'm using the lion analogy today. This is called, Nepo calls it, facing the lion. Here it is. You got a lion right in front of you. What are you going to do now? This is finding our way to our core is facing the lion. Now, many of us, me included, we come from a religious background where we are oftentimes, if not consistently, called when the lion comes and we have to face it. That's when things aren't working well and we don't want to, you know, that's when we call upon God. Hey, God, please help me. And it's a God outside of ourselves. Please help. And, you know, that serves. I am not diminishing that, but I'm just going to make a distinction. And it's like, and it's usually when things aren't going well. And it's not like calling upon God when things are great. It's something's happened and the lion's here and we got to face it. And it's this facing the lion. Here's where courage comes in. Courage, remember, is when we stand by. Remember, it's inside of me. We stand by one's core. We stand by one's core. And so, when we stand by our core, we no longer face the lion and have all those things I just described. We be the lion. I put male and female versions up there. We be the lion. And that's the distinction. And that takes courage. To stand by, to stand with, is a way of understanding so that we can sustain the practice of living from our core. Living with our core, right? And living out of this courage, always, as often as we can. It's this inner courage instead of something outside of us. It's the God within. And to be the lion, no matter what, is to have unwavering faith, I believe. Now, there is someone that many of us are familiar with and have a relationship with, and I'm deepening my relationship, and that is Jesus. And he set out to prove, as Ernest Holmes will tell us, that one person with God, he says, could do and demonstrate for all the ages, this one person, to prove that with God and with unwavering faith, he could do anything. And that's the kind of faith we're called on to have. That's what he's calling us to have. It's not a faith that's found in a book. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you. Doesn't matter what book you pick up, it's not faith that's found in a book. It's not faith it's not faith that someone else can give you. No matter how often you come here or come to a class, I cannot give you this faith. And the reason being is you already possess it. So I can't give it to you. You already possess it. The only question is for each of us is whether or not we believe in a power greater than ourselves. And that is what we are, and that is what we can use. And whether or not we actually believe that that power is ready, willing, and able to respond. And that's a slippery word too, but it's on. It's like electricity all the time. It just responds when we tell it light. Without unwavering faith, there's the light. Always. So the fact that Jesus is this one person, not the only person, but the one person that his whole ministry demonstrated the power of being with God, the God within, is one thing. The other thing that he said, which is also important, is he emphasized throughout his entire teachings was what he was doing. In every moment, what he was doing, you can do. You can do also. And so if they believe, he says, if you believe and you believe in God. So there's courage. This inward spiritual realization in everyone, something that is beyond, it's beyond all doubt, fear, and uncertainty. And so it brings us beyond facing the lion, it brings us to being the lion. So I pulled out one of my favorite books of Ernest Holmes. I don't think they publish them anymore. Get it on eBay. I think that's where I got mine. It was when I bought it falling apart. Now it's really falling apart. It's called The Philosophy of Jesus for the World Today by Ernest Holmes. And I started looking at this again in preparation of courage. So I want you to imagine, let's go back in time, or actually let's go back to today, because time is irrelevant. And I want you to imagine that we are standing with a crowd of people, friends and family alike, and one of our loved ones have died. And he's in a tomb. And his name is Lazarus. And we're standing there. And here's Jesus being asked to come to do something in front of this tomb. And this is what Ernest Holmes shares with us. He says, let us think of Jesus standing before the tomb of Lazarus, where the friends and relatives have gathered, hoping at least to find some comfort from his words, but not even daring to dream that Lazarus could be resurrected from the dead. Jesus stood there in front of the tomb, one man alone with God. Unwavering faith, courage. He was being the lion. He stood just a little apart from the others. Because see, what he was thinking and what he was believing with this unwavering faith wasn't the typical thought of a gathering of people. And you know how when people gather, they can tell you that ain't going to work, or it is, or whatever. So he stood apart from them. He lifted up his soul in silent communion with the Spirit of all life, that Spirit that knows no death. Something flowed into him, and he turned around and said, now imagine someone saying this, and you hear him. You're in ear's breadth, and he says, take ye away the stone. Well, they protested profusely, angrily, because Lazarus had been in there for 4 days, if nothing else. They were like, no, don't roll away the stone. And he's like, roll away the stone. Now, let us watch carefully what Jesus did and listen to his words. As he said, our teaching is in here. Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I know that thou hearest me always. Listen to what Ernest Holmes says. This is recognition of the divine presence. Recognition, for all you have ever studied how we pray. Affirmative prayer. And the divine power that is always available. Here is faith and unification. There was no doubt, no uncertainty, no stammering or stuttering, no imploring or beseeching, just simple words. I thank thee. Gratitude. Thou hast hearest me always. Certainty. He's being the lion. Next comes the supreme command. You ready? Realization. Imagine the courage that this took. Lazarus, come forth. He declared it. He said it. Come forth. One man with God, recognizing life instead of death, until the tomb surrendered its dead, and Lazarus came forth, and Jesus told them to loose him and let him go. I'm doing numbers because these are our 5 steps of spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer. So Holmes continues, Lazarus, then this is now we're flipping out on a different perspective. Lazarus is each one of us, bound by the restriction of circumstances, tied by the habits of thought, and incarcerated in a tomb from which it seems as though we cannot extricate ourselves. Loose him and let him go. There is much in each of us that must be loosed. The ropes of fear that bind us, the winding sheet of doubt and uncertainty, the darkness and gloom of our self-imposed prison, and the stone that must be rolled away. Yes, and the doubts of others who would block the action of faith because all they see is a stone and a tomb and the dead man inside. And they say, you dare not roll away that stone. Imagine the courage to be that lion. Ernest Holmes continues, let us think of the silent communion we have with the Spirit that knows no bondage, with the life that knows no death, and with the power that knows no obstruction. As we do this, something within us comes alive and awake and aware and gives us the courage and the assurance to say, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. So out of this communion comes a divine authority. Authority in our lives. A divine authority, a way of being, of living, a way of life. So as I was thinking about this, okay, one could say that's an extreme example, or one could say it wasn't. It happens every day. As we be the lion, it's time for that to happen every day. So thinking about courage in this way opens us to an array of small and constant, I use that term loosely, and constant efforts that no one ever sees. You know, we think sometimes of courage of, that extreme whatever of running into the burning building and bringing the person out. That's great, but or that moment where we're called to lift the car and there's just undeniable physical strength. But I'm talking about every single day and every single moment. This is the courage. And it's stuff that none of us see. Some of us barely hear about in our own lives here in this community. We get to hear about them probably more frequently. You need to just share some of this stuff with each other more. And this courage changes the world, the courage to feel, to see, to accept, to heal, and to be. It's like the courage to break life-draining patterns. Doesn't that take courage? For those of you who've done that, it takes lots of courage to let the story of our lives unfold rather than let the story of our past continue to unfold our life. That takes courage. Like the courage to persevere through the doorway of nothing. You know, you have a business idea, you have a song you want to write, you have a class you want to teach, whatever it is, you have a vision to serve people in the world, and it appears, this doorway of nothing, into the realm of everything. That takes courage. The courage to choose compassion over judgment. That takes courage. Love over fear. And it takes courage to stand within the tension of seeming opposites. You're very different than me. We have a lot of that in this community. But isn't this great that we have the courage to stand there in what seems to be opposites because we look at our commonalities, right? To give up what no longer works in order to stay close to what is sacred. I was reminded to give up something that doesn't work to remain close to something that's sacred. And that happened to me in 2013. This courage to be the lion, to know that while we're doing something in each and every step, we cannot fail. God cannot fail. And when we come from that place, we don't fail. I had a sacred yes in becoming a licensed minister. Of course, I had a sacred yes long before that. I mean, years before that. It was just then there came a time for license. And so every little step along the way, I had to keep building my courage. I had to learn how to be that lion instead of facing the lion. And Dr. Deborah talks about it in this book. The chapter's called Courage, if you're wondering. Chapter 11. She says, courage is the ability to continue to walk in the direction of your surrender. I don't like that word. I'm glad Dr. Petra's going to talk about surrender. I don't know about y'all. At the moment when it is important for you to exercise courage, there is something that you are surrendering. It may be the potential impact on your relationships as a result of the actions you're engaging in. It may be the fact that once the action is taken, your life will never be quite the same. Facing these possibilities is troublesome for most people. It creates fear, anxieties, apprehension, and great concern. Yes? At least one of those? Yeah. The fact that you may experience these things is really not so much the point. Rather, the point is the way you allow these things to influence the steps that you know that you must take. So, this thing called courage is really about the discipline of you continuing to move towards your understanding of a divine plan in spite of all appearances. There will be many, 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 many appearances that you will have to wade through, pierce through, transcend, wrestle with, deny the truth within, and move beyond. I love this next part. There is a misconception that allows us to believe that as we grow in our spiritual maturity, there are fewer things we have to deal with. Just take that in. this stuff ain't working. It's still, I still have to deal with stuff. This is not the case. It is true that you will have fewer things to deal with in the areas and the arenas that are familiar. That is to say, you won't keep manifesting the same conditions over and over and over again. Whew. However, as you grow in your spiritual maturity, your perception increases. And as your perception increases, there is more for you to see, to become aware of, and to face. So we need to be the lion as we spiritually mature in our life. So some of you have heard the story or the mystical experience I had at a BART station in Oakland, California when I lived there. I won't go into it. Find that talk. Send me an email. I'll show you where it is. And what I didn't share is the back half of that story. Because in that moment, I knew the core. I stood by my core. I stood within. I knew what it meant to be love and what that does not only in me, but everything around me. But what I didn't share with you is when I got home, when I literally got in my driveway after that big experience, I started crying. I didn't know why. I got into my living room and I started wailing. Anybody ever wail in their life? Look, yeah, I'd only heard of wailing. I wailed. I mean it, yes. And as I was wailing, I asked within me, the wisdom within me, I'm like, what is this about? And the answer came just like that. Your 11-year relationship just ended. I had no plans. I went, what? Because the big thing that I learned in that moment was the power of being love, and I could not stand in front of anyone, because I care about being in integrity when I stand in front of you. I could not stand in front of anyone and say, God wants you to have it all, and you can have it. I didn't believe I could. Because I was settling in some things, many areas of my life, and that was one. And so I surrendered, and I had the courage to move through, and I knew by saying that out loud, this relationship is over. I mean, everything in my life would change. And I had no idea what was going to happen next. And I had unwavering faith that I knew that there was something in this big sacred yes, and keep going. And it brought me all the way here, right? But it's scary in every single moment. Now, sometimes this being the lion, these moments when we allow the courage to move us in the direction of our sacred yes, surrender, let's call it, as Reverend Deborah does, sometimes it not only changes our life, doesn't have to change everything, but it probably changes something. It changes everyone around us as well, right? I came across a story in this Mark Nepo book that best describes what I want to articulate to you this morning. Because when we have these moments and we take up from facing the lion to the courage to be the lion, everything has changed from that point on. Doesn't mean that all this stuff, because I don't want y'all going into fear again, that it all has to change. But our lives are forever changed. So there was this quiet man. He was a quiet man. He was a diplomat in the 1700s. And he was a Manchurian diplomat. And his name was Wu Feng. He took a post on the outskirts of Taiwan with an Aboriginal tribe. Wu Feng befriended, over time, the Aboriginal chief. They became friends. Now, it just so happened in this tribe, in this particular tribe in the 1700s, on the outskirts of Taiwan, yes, that in this tribe, at the same time every year, the chief would choose one person in that tribe and would behead him as a form of a sacrifice. That was the times in this tribe. So each year, Wu Fang pleaded with all of his compassion and reverence for life that the chief put an end to this custom. Can you see him up there just, standing and pleading? And the chief would listen respectfully as Wu Fang would plead. And then after listening and bowing to him, the chief would summon the chosen tribe member and without hesitation, behead him. Finally, after living with the tribe for 25 years, Wu Fang once more pleaded with the chief to stop this senseless killing. By this time, when the tribe member was called forth, Wu Fang took his place and said, "No, if you will kill this time, it will be me." The chief stared long into his friend's eyes, and having grown to love Wu Fang, he could not kill him. From that day, the practice of beheading stopped. Of course, Wu Fang could have been killed, but his courage shows us that at a certain point, how we live inside takes priority. At a certain point for each of us, talk evaporates, and words cannot bring love into the open. In the end, it is not enough to think what we know. We must live it. Only by living it can love show itself as the greatest principle, the greatest power, the greatest presence of all. God is love. Love is God. So there's some questions and lessons perhaps that we could learn from Wu Fang and the chief. What made Wu Fang finally, after 25 years, put himself in the middle of the issue? In the middle of the issue. What made watching become intolerable? What ounce of courage starting in what quiet corner of Wu Fang's soul moved him to stand before that chief? And what ounce of courage finally opened the chief to change? So, what I would love for us all to ponder, to discern, and to be with is, where does Wu Fang live in us? Where is the chief? How do we make a practice of moving like Wu Fang and move from facing the lion to standing by our core within and be the lion Be the lion. And how do we, like the chief, make a practice of softening our adherence to a tradition or an old pattern or a false belief or something is telling us that kills, and open ourselves wide to the core, the heart. Remember the heart? The core. That was Reverend Deborah. To stand by our core is to be the lion, to stand by, to stand with, to live out of our courage. That's the courage to be. We're called in our own lives, in our own ways, in our own hearts, in our own minds, for the sake of our life and for the sake of everyone around us. And I know we're facing it. We're facing it every day. But we don't have to face it, wait for it. We can be the lion. And to know that the power and the presence of life itself, of God itself, is who I am. Say that. The power and the presence of God, of life itself, is who I am. So, I invite you, if you want, if you're willing, if you're able, if you're called, and if not, that's great. But if there is something that up until now you've been facing the lion, and you want to be the lion, and you want to stand with on the inside of all of life, then I invite you to stand in this prayer. You can sit, it's okay. But if you want to, I invite you to stand with, stand for that which is. I am so grateful Heavenly Father, life itself, God's Spirit, I am so grateful to be here now, to be here in this moment of my life, and to be here in this moment of every single person in the sound of my voice, their life. That although life may have been coming towards us, and we would face it over and over, and the many times, over again, sometimes perhaps, as Cortland's saying, we felt alone. Sometimes we felt defeated. Sometimes it was just darn hard to get out of bed. I'm grateful that we're here in this moment to be the love, to have the courage to be the heart of all of life, to know that the greatest power that is so beyond me is within me, and it is me. To know that these beloved teachings give us a new perspective, a new awakening to life. And so that we are this army of love. We are this light. Because that's who we came here to be. And so, I speak the word. by the power and authority of the Christ consciousness, I speak the word for every single person in the sound of this voice, that if there should be or could be or perhaps not even known an obstruction, a blockage, something within that says you're not good enough, you can't go through this, not handling it, don't touch the tomb. I know that the power within is real. I know that the power within is love. I know that the power within is God. And I speak this word and declare, move. Come out of the tomb. Be the love and the light and the power and the presence in your life. And I claim that this is real and this is so for every single person right here and right now. And that as we know this and we be this, the multitudes multiply. And that brings heaven to earth right here and right now. The madness is stopped. The killing is stopped. The disparity is stopped. The us and them is dissolved. There's only one God. There's only one life. We can't get outside of it. So it must be each of us. And so loving our brother and our sisters and our neighbors, we wrap all of life literally within the arms and the heart of the infinite. We let it loose. We let it go. We let it be. And so it is. Amen.